Welcome for those watching us through the internet. And good morning.
Morning.
I said good morning.
Good morning.
Much better. Thank you so much. All right, so today we're going to have Tiago talk about salvation according to Spiritism. So it's the last Sunday of the month. But before we get there, I'm going to invite Livia to do the initial reading and Fabio to do the prayer. All right. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. The initial reading is from the book Happy Life by Divaldo Pereira Franco and Joana de Angelis. Bad thoughts poison the soul. They attract pessimism and the sickening presence of bad and disturbed spirits. Keep your mind on positive, illuminating ideas and ennobling actions that will provide inner well-being and the joy of living. What you think about intensely will eventually come to pass. Facts are first embodied in the mind, and then become reality in the physical body. Think good thoughts and bathe yourself in the light of love.
Let us now calm our hearts, make a little peace in our soul, so we could start with initial prayer. Dear Lord, thank you for being here, for being able to come to share the joy of a little bit of enlightenment, to understand a little bit what is a salvation according to the teachings of Kardec and the spiritual friends that helped him. Let us hope that our hearts will be attuned with these teachings, with these lessons, so we could use them with our lives, so we could share them with our friends and our neighbors, so that this love and this inspiration could be with us all the time. Lord, bless us our meeting and bless us this day, and so be it. Tiago, please.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Oh, I'm ahead of myself. Let me go back. Very good to see everyone here. I think everyone is leaving the hibernation period, right? It's a little warmer. Everyone is getting out of their cocoons. Well, I am at least. So, very happy to see everyone, and I hope that I can share with you a little bit of the understanding of the Spiritism about what we call salvation. Salvation is an interesting word, and I believe, at least for me, there are many different understandings. When someone talks about salvation, there are many things that come to my mind. And the first things that come to me are memories. At least in my case, I was brought up in a different faith. Even though Christian, it was a different faith. And very commonly, very often, I would hear something about salvation. The conditions to be saved. You need to do certain things. You need to believe in certain things to be saved. And I kept asking myself, to be saved from what? Everything seems to be fine so far. You're a child, saved from the dog of the neighbor, that ran after me or something like that. From the food that I didn't like when someone made at home, saved me from those kind of things. But then, we start growing up and we start questioning. I started growing up and I started questioning. What is that salvation? We talk about religion. We talk about spirituality. So we talk about our inner world, So I started thinking, what should I be saved from? And what do I need to do in order to be granted that salvation? I started understanding a little bit more about salvation when I came across Spiritism. That is also Christian, but somehow gave me a little more of down-to-earth understanding, what salvation is, what are the conditions for that salvation, And what should I follow? Is there any sort of model example that I should, follow in order to acquire that salvation? So let's go step by step. In my studies, I realized that salvation is totally intertwined with charity. Every time that I study Spiritism and I look about salvation, almost every time, something about charity comes to place. So then I started, okay, now it becomes more complicated. I'm studying salvation. Now I need to start studying about charity. Yes, that is true. And then that statement comes all the time as well. And I'm going to just let the statement float on top of our heads, and then we're going to go back to that statement at the end of the lecture, which is, without charity, there is no salvation. That is the statement. It's one of the main principles that Spiritism presents to us, which is a huge shift from the mainstream Christianity that talks about a different route to salvation. But specifically, the Spiritism talks about charity. Without charity, there is no salvation. So, in order to understand that, I did, without charity, there is no salvation. I start from salvation and I go to charity, and I'm going to guide you through my thoughts, and hope that you're going to understand a little bit. What would be salvation? What does that mean, that word, simply? If we look at the dictionary, there is something to do with delivery from harm. To be saved is to be taken away from harm, or from destruction, from something bad happening to us. So to be saved is to be delivered from harm. That's great. So, again, in Christianity, in religion, what would that mean? More or less, it is the right to go to heaven when we die. We know that in general, Christianity would say that there is a heaven and there is a hell. And in order to go to heaven, there are things that we need to do. And mainstream Christianity will tell us, first of all, you need to believe in Jesus. Okay, that's fair. And in some religions, you would need to be baptized. So then when you are baptized, you basically leave that realm of the limbo, or not to be accepted by God, and then you adopt God in your life. You are baptized, and then you have the right to go to heaven. And then others would say other things. That is the confession and other practices that are important to lead us to salvation. Well, there is nothing essentially wrong with any of that. And if we start understanding what would mean then to adopt, for instance, to believe, to have faith in Jesus, which is a very important thing for Christians, but only saying, I believe, only saying, I've been baptized, only saying, I repent from the wrongs that I've done, would that be enough to grant us that so desired salvation, to go to this heaven? We understand in Spiritism that is not exactly the case. It is not that simple. There is a little more to it. Usually, those steps to go through salvation, they easily can be external actions that not necessarily will have a meaning in our inner world. I can say that I have faith, and I can say that I repent. But from there to really have faith, from there to really repent, and even for Spiritism, we understand that repenting from something is a process. To have faith is something that we develop. It's not something that is given to us. No one can tell me I've been freed from my wrongs. It is something that I need to do. It is something that I need to conquer with action, with effort, and with work. Therefore, Spiritism helps us to understand that instead of being something granted to us, salvation is something that comes essentially from within. Okay. Jesus himself already told us that. When he told us, if anyone will come after me, which means today would say, if anyone believes really in me, if anyone wants to follow what I'm teaching you for more than 2,000 years, if anyone decides to follow that path that I gave you in order for you to follow, he told us, let them deny themselves, take up their cross and follow me. He's not saying, give me your cross for me to carry for you. He is not saying, let me deny myself for you to be saved. Jesus, all his life, pointed out to each one of us, saying, if you have faith, you will be saved. If you do what you need to do in order to change your life, then you will be saved. Jesus never told us, what I will do will grant you salvation. Throughout the centuries, we know that a lot of Jesus' message was distorted for the reasons that we don't need to go through in this lecture. But the fact is, there is a lot of misunderstanding. And it's very easy for us still, because we are still imperfect. It is more convenient sometimes, and it's easier for us to put the responsibility of our problems in others or in sources that are external to us. Therefore, the solution will also not belong to us. If the problem doesn't belong to me, why would the solution belong to me then? But then we understand that, one, we are imperfect. Therefore, there are lots of things that we do that make us suffer. The suffering that we go through is directly proportional to our level of imperfection or our level of evolution. And more we perfect ourselves, more and more we change our ways, we act more in according to the teachings that Jesus taught us, we will slowly become happier, have more peace of mind, therefore come closer to what we are talking about, which is that so-called salvation. At the end of the day, the essence is, who is the only person that can save ourselves? Us. Very modest. We are still unsure. You can say out loud, the only person can save ourselves is in fact ourselves. That is the first shift that the Spiritism will give us. Therefore, I collected a couple of items of what salvation is not. So then we just eliminate once for all what salvation is not. Salvation is not something that is granted to us. Spiritism will teach us that. Remember, to each one according to their works. So it is not something that is going to be given. No one can tell me I am saved. If someone comes to you and say you are saved, they are not talking about what we are talking about right now. They are talking about saving you from something else. But the idea of salvation is not something that is granted to us. And we still didn't get there, right? We still don't know exactly what salvation is, but we're going to start with what is not. Salvation is not acquired only by believing. If I say that I believe in something, I believe in, many things. From there, to act upon what I believe, to really walk the walk of what I believe, is a huge difference. I believe in Jesus. Do I walk the way that Jesus taught me to walk? I think I'm still a little far from that, fully. Do I believe in the spiritual world? Yes, I believe in the spiritual world. Do I act according to certain precepts that are going to help me to go back to the spiritual world and be happier? I don't know. I am doing my best. Sometimes I'm not even my best I'm doing. But not necessarily believing means living. Salvation is something that we don't only believe, but we need to live. It is not something immediate. Right? Okay, you were saved. From that moment on, you have no more imperfections, you have no wrongdoings, you're not going to suffer any natural consequence from anything that you were doing. You're going to start fresh. Well, that is not exactly like that. We know that what we live today is a consequence that what we have been doing for centuries and centuries and centuries. What we are going to face tomorrow as a natural consequence in our lives has to do what we are doing today. No punishment. Not anything like that. It is a natural consequence. Therefore, that idea of salvation, of something that you do something, magically you're saved, it's not correct. And finally, it is not exclusive of only one faith or one religion. Otherwise, how many Christians there are in the world? Let's say that there are between 1, 2 billion maybe. What about all the other 5 billion people? Are they doomed for eternity because they don't have that belief? Because they don't go to a special place to ask for forgiveness for the wrongdoings that they did? And then be granted immediately that salvation to go to heaven after they die? Is that beautiful place a place that is exclusive for certain people? The idea of being happy is something granted only for some people that do certain things that not necessarily they really live by? We don't think so. So now that we know that what salvation is not, let's think about what salvation is. So if it is not immediate, salvation is a process. Okay, so now instead of having one, landmark, here the salvation happens and from then you are happy, we need to incorporate that idea of salvation throughout our existence. And how do we know that? There is a book, beautiful book, psychographed by Francisco Cândido Xavier, by the Spirit André Luiz, that is called In the Greater World. And in this book, that in the spiritual life, there is an instructor, a spiritual instructor. It is a super hyper enhanced version of what I'm doing here. I'm very small, and then you have Eusébio, which is the real guy that is there giving a sort of a lecture for religious leaders, which is very interesting. Eusébio is giving a lecture to religious leaders from many different faiths. We are talking about something inclusive, not exclusive. Something that belongs to all of us. All of us have the right to know about the principles that are going to lead us to happiness. And Eusébio, in the middle of this beautiful lecture, would say, salvation is a continual work of renewal and improvement. And he continues talking about faith and talking about putting in practice that faith. And when we talk about religion, I think all of us in some point in our lives question the idea of religion, the idea of those representatives of the divinity that are going to give us lessons. We can question ourselves if we are following certain faith, if we are really coherent with those teachings. And that is exactly the message that Eusébio is giving those leaders, in consequence giving all of us that follow certain faith. It is not enough to tell someone that we have the faith. It is not enough for me to tell you have faith if I don't exercise my own faith as well. That is a process. It's continual work. Salvation is improvement. Improvement of what? Improvement of our spirit. Acquiring and developing qualities of our spirit. Qualities of the sentiment. Qualities of our inner being. And then we can name. Jesus already gave the most beautiful instruction manual for human beings. You know, if you go to the Sermon of the Mount, we're going to improve our forgiveness. We're going to improve our tolerance, our respect, our fraternity, our benevolence. It is continual work. It is not someone telling me I'm saved. It is something that I need to develop in myself. It is also a path to happiness and protection against our evils. And when I talk about evils here, it is about our own imperfections. It's the consequence of our own imperfections. I may have a bad temper, but if I strive to be better, not only I will be happier, but also I will prevent that the consequence of this bad temper will give me suffering as well. Give suffering to others and give some suffering to myself. If I don't pay attention on my attitudes and what I cause in others, I will suffer the consequence. I may hurt a loved one and tomorrow they might not be there for me because I hurt them too much. I may hurt myself and enter in a process of self-destruction that is only giving me more pain. But when we talk about salvation, we talk about knowing ourselves, knowing what we are capable of, understanding those characters in us that are positive, that give us happiness, that give us peace of mind, that are positive, that are helpful for me and for others, and the ones that are not. The measure is the pain that I cause in myself or others, and consequently the happiness that I cause in myself and in others. The idea of salvation implies a relationship with myself and with my neighbor. And in the book O Espírito da Verdade, which is not translated to English directly, would be the Spirit of Truth, which is a series of messages that make comments on the Spirit's book by many spirits. The spirits would say that liberation and preservation of the spirit against greater evils in its way, in order to build its own happiness in the realm of the good, rising higher steps of evolution. That is one of their definitions of salvation. So salvation is liberation. Liberation from what? liberation from all those mistakes that we are making continuously for centuries, that we are repeating unconsciously because we don't look much to ourselves, because it's a hard thing to do. Liberation from the extreme attachment to people, to things, to everything that is earthly, that blocks us from freeing ourselves spiritually. Liberation from the ignorance. Remember, Jesus told us, know the truth. The truth will set you free, will liberate you from ignorance. So salvation is a process of liberation. Salvation is an individual process. I cannot be saved for you. You cannot be saved for me. Therefore, the idea that Jesus died to save us needs to be understood more deeply than simply saying, He died, we are free. He died, we have no sin. He shed His blood, we are saved. It needs to be studied, understood, reflected deeply. Jesus' death was one moment of His entire life. His death is important, yes, but His entire life, 33 years before, is as important, if not more important, because the lessons, the teachings, His steps, everyone He talked to are lessons of liberation, are lessons to be learned. His entire life is an invitation for us to go through this process, knowing ourselves, loving each other, liberating ourselves from ignorance, therefore to be saved. And Eusébio again. I like this man. If you have the opportunity, please. I believe even we have the book here, if you like to learn more about it. And Eusébio will tell us that to save or rescue certain individuals, and he's talking about if we follow Jesus, we can share that. So then you can also go through that process of salvation. That idea of saving someone is basically presenting the tools that I am also trying to use in order for to acquire my own salvation. Therefore, I can share with you. It doesn't mean to take away the opportunity to develop through struggle, to grow, and to edify themselves. It is not something that I can do for you. I cannot take away your struggle. Your struggle is essential for you to grow. My struggle is essential for me to grow. What I need to go through, you don't. What you need to go through, not necessarily I do. But we all need to go through something in order to grow. We only grow when we are faced with some difficulty, with some struggle, with some challenge to overcome, to learn how to deal with it. Spiritually, we are given opportunity to relate with people that are so different to us, to live together with people that we don't necessarily get that much along with. But those relationships are your relationships. What I go through in my own relationship life is different than what you go through. Tell you that every relationship is beautiful, every marriage is this, every relationship between a father and a son, a mother and a daughter, and then it goes, is the same. It is not true. The relationship that I have with myself How do I deal with my good days and my bad days and my so days? The days that doesn't matter, that we think, I don't care if I stay in bed or if I get up. All of this are experiences that I go through. The difficulty that I have to get out of bed every single day is one of the best elements that I have to learn how to find what makes me move, what makes me alive, what makes me want to get out of bed. And it's different from what you have as a reason to get out of bed. To each one according to their works. To each one according to their struggle, to their challenge, to their opportunity. Therefore, to each one according to the solutions that they find to have reason to get out of bed every single day. Therefore, to be saved. To be saved from apathy. To be saved from the helplessness that we can fall through if we don't strive to find the life that everyone has. And God doesn't make any favors, especially for one or for another person. That idea of you look at the neighbor's grass that is greener is not because God likes their grass better. It's because they got out of bed, and a reason for them to get out of bed that day it was to fertilize their grass, to nurture their ground where they step. Therefore, to make their path worth walking. God gave us all the same starting point, the same resources in the entire universe for us to take advantage of, and the same finish line. The journey that we are going through belongs to each one of us. Sometimes we go through some parts together, thinking about Olympic Games. Sometimes we play in teams. Sometimes we play solo. But at the end of the day, each one gets a medal, depending how well we are doing. We don't get one medal for everyone. Each one will get one, depending the level that we are. Therefore, each one of us will then harvest the fruits of our own dedication, of our own effort, of our own works. And finally, salvation is, and I believe that's one of the most important here, salvation is aligning ourselves with the divine laws. So, Jesus told us, so whatever you wish to do, whatever you wish that others would do to you, you do to others. And Jesus said, that is all the law and all the prophets. And remember, what would that mean? All the law and all the prophets. When Jesus was asked about the greatest commandment, Jesus said, love your God with all your knowledge, with all your love, with all your soul. And the second commandment that is similar to the first, love your neighbor as yourself. If we go back there to the golden rule, we will understand that in order to be saved, the idea of salvation implies we need to nurture the divine law from within ourselves and exteriorize that. we all remember that Jesus already said, where is the kingdom of God? Is it here? Is it there? No. The kingdom of God is within ourselves. The spirits tell Allan Kardec, therefore, where are the divine laws written? In our conscience. It is the rewriting of the same message for us. The kingdom of God is within you. The divine laws are written in our conscience. So the divine laws are with us all the time. We do have the seeds of those divine laws. We have the seed of love, the seed of justice, the seed of charity, the seed of progress, the seed of freedom within us. Therefore, when we talk about salvation, we talk about an effort that we make to turn those seeds into something that we can exteriorize, to finally love as a concrete action, to be free by having the freedom of conscience that we are doing the best that we can, to be in peace with us and with others. To be saved is to finally follow the laws and the teachings that were given to us in the best of our knowledge, in the best of our abilities, depending the level of evolution, because it doesn't matter. What matters is what is the best that I can do today. Everyone can be therefore saved in their own path by doing the best that they can today. Are we going to do this perfectly? Not today, tomorrow, but not today. But today we're going to do absolutely the best that we can. Therefore, every time that we do something good, the reward also comes from within. We don't need reward from outside. The salvation as the peace of mind, as the peace of conscience, is that feeling of being rewarded by learning how to do something that is good. That is what I like to share with you for now about what salvation is. We can go through different avenues to talk about salvation. But if we take the Spiritism, the teachings that are given to us, we can be sure that this path is very coherent. It is really going to take us to a place where we're going to feel rewarded for putting in practice. There you go. Salvation for you. Now, not happy, we need to go through charity. Because, again, salvation and charity walk hand by hand. So let's talk a little bit about charity. And I just like to remind all of you about the parable of the Good Samaritan. And that is a good illustration of what charity in this case would mean. Remember that a lawyer, which is interesting, lawyers, tax collectors, all those folks go after Jesus, right? Back in the time, all those people, lawyers, tax collectors, the publicans, as the Bible would say, they were people that did things that enraged the population. The tax collectors were not well seen by people. And many of them acquired a lot of wealth through not so legal means back in the time. Very different from today. So it is interesting that basically, Jesus brings a lot of those examples exactly for the people that essentially are imperfect. I could might as well be a lawyer because I am very imperfect. I could might as well be one of those folks that took advantages. And of course that they wanted to test Jesus all the time. But Jesus was clever. Very clever. Very intelligent. Jesus could perceive the most deep intentions of people. How many times we have second intentions when we ask something to someone? But Jesus would look to us, recognize all of those little second intentions, and give an answer that would not only break them, but always give them a good lesson. And the parable of the Good Samaritan is a great lesson for us. Because this lawyer says, "Teacher, what should I do to acquire the eternal life? To be saved, to go to heaven?" Well, we talked about that. What are the commandments, right? Love God, love your neighbor as yourself. Do it. You will be fine. And then he asked, "Who is my neighbor?" Then. Because again, just there, not today, there was a lot of division. There was a lot of us and them. There was a lot of better and worse. There was a lot of rich and poor, worth, not worth. Not today, right? Okay. And then Jesus tells this parable. Right? He talks about a man walking to Jericho, and he falls and is there about to die. And then he talks about a first person who was going on the way, who was a priest. And he passes, looks to this man, and takes off, goes on his way. And then the second one, a Levite, looks and goes. And the third one, he mentions a Samaritan. A Samaritan back in the time, it was considered the lower class. They're not very well seen. Oh, a Samaritan. It was lower class. It was them, not us. It was them. And the Samaritan, filled with compassion, stops, helps this man, and not only that, takes them to a place, gives them shelter, pays for their stay, comes back to see if he's okay, and then goes on his way. And Jesus asked, which one of the three proved to be the neighbor of the man who fell amongst the robbers? And of course the lawyer says, the one who showed him mercy. And Jesus said, you go and do likewise. The one who showed him mercy. So we see that the condition to be saved when we talk about charity is because we talk about how much easier sometimes, depending our level of evolution, I'm talking about depending our level of evolution. I know that all of us already have drive. All of us have some good interest, some good intention. We strive to think differently. We strive to do something good. Sometimes we succeed, sometimes we don't. Sometimes we pass those or that cause in need that is really at hand for us to help. Sometimes we stop, sometimes we don't. Sometimes we make the effort, sometimes we don't. Sometimes we choose someone else's need over ours. Sometimes our needs are more important. That is right or wrong? There is what our conscience tells us of what charity will mean. Charity is an act that is in benefit of others, therefore to ourselves. Of course, Allan Kardec asks the spirits, what is charity? In its purity, the way that Jesus taught us. And the spirits would say, benevolence towards everyone, indulgence towards the imperfections of others, and the forgiveness of the offenses. Here we are, benevolence, indulgence, forgiveness. All of those three, if we carry in a book, someone comes across, says something that we don't like, we come with a paper, say, how can I be benevolent? How can I be indulgent? And how can I forgive? If we do that once, we will understand what is the effort that we need to make. Especially if we know them. If we don't know them, don't you think it is easier to forgive? Who are the people that most hurt us? They need to be close, right? Someone can step in my foot is beside me. Someone who knows where it hurts. That's why the idea of neighbor is so important. Because in fact, when we are able to do that with our neighbors, to do that with strangers become much easier. We have less attachment. Probably we have less previous attachments and relationships with them. Charity, Allan Kardec would say, according to Jesus, is not restricted to giving alms. It's not about giving necessarily money or material goods. Embraces all our relations with our fellow humans, whether they are in a situation below, equal, or superior to our own. That's what Allan Kardec says. Therefore, the idea of below, equal, or superior disappears. And when we act with charity, we are able to see finally each other as neighbor, as brother, as sister, as coming from the same place, having the same destination, going through similar struggles, in need to be forgiven because it's not perfect, just like us. This is charity. And of course, charity and humility, or humbleness, as we are saying, they also walk hand by hand. That is the sole path of salvation. In the words of Allan Kardec, charity and humility are the sole path of salvation. Talk about salvation without talking about charity doesn't quite work. in order to talk about salvation, we need to talk about what to do to acquire salvation. Then we can take some principles here, like we did with salvation. Let's just take a couple of principles here. Charity is an action on someone's benefit. Some would say, and I think especially who studied Spiritism back in Brazil would say, charity is love in action. As many would say. Because the idea of love is a sentiment. When we put that sentiment into action, we can call them charity. That is a way that was built for us to understand. One thing is the sentiment that we have, and the thing is the action. Remember, the Apostle James also said, the faith itself without the works is dead in itself. There needs to be an action. He never abandons anyone, because the idea of mercy, the idea of compassion, the idea of seeing someone in need, feeling our own need, and doing to others what we want others to do to ourselves, makes us never abandon. Is the idea of the Good Samaritan. Filled with mercy, stopped, no matter who was waiting for them along the way. They will understand when I come late a little bit. There is a need, an immediate need here to be met. Charity is an expression of love towards God and towards our neighbor. Towards our neighbor, of course, because we will see each other fraternally. And towards God, because we need to understand the source of that love, the source of that law. Where does this come from? Where do we come from? Therefore, we will praise the source of love, so we can act with love towards others. Therefore, the love for God. And it is the foundation for the development of all the other virtues. It is very interesting because I remember also Allan Kardec talking in the Gospel according to Spiritism. It is better to have less virtue with more humility than have more virtue with less humility, because this will neutralize one another. Therefore, the idea of charity automatically will imply humbleness, will imply respect, will imply fraternity, will imply benevolence, will never imply the feeling of being superior to others. That's what we call pride. It will never incite that feeling that I deserve more than others. Therefore, it doesn't imply selfishness. It will always be a way to develop all of our other virtues, because we will have the main force that is going to drive us. And it is the main instrument of human salvation. And then we really put together charity is the main instrument for our salvation. And of course, that automatically will bring all of us together, because then we will see each other as people who deserve in the same way that I do. You all deserve in the same way that I do. You all deserve to be loved. You all deserve to have your needs heard and met, like I believe that I do have as well. You are not more than me, I'm not more than you. We can finally live fraternally. We are not going to step on each other's toes in order to have anything better than others. Because we know that the qualities that we are acquiring, I don't need to take from anyone else. It is already here. It is already there. I don't need to take anything to have more. I need to give more to have more. Because in giving, I put in practice. In giving, I exercise my ability to give. Therefore, I will be more giving, more generous. If I love more, my love is not going to disappear. It is going to grow. So then I will give more. And I will see that your love potentially will grow as well. So we will always multiply instead of divide. We will unite. Well, to wrap it up, another story from the gospel. That is the story of Jesus and Zacchaeus. I hope I'm saying this name well. I just know in Portuguese. So the story of the what is called the conversion of Zacchaeus is very important because it talks about that idea of salvation. It talks about how we are all ready to put this in practice. And this little story, and I will condensate. In the way Jesus entered Jericho, and Jesus was going to Jerusalem. So in a few days from that moment, Jesus was going to Jerusalem, was entering Jerusalem with the palms and the donkey, and from there he would be betrayed, he would be arrested, persecuted, and soon after that he would be crucified. So he is in Jericho, and he was passing through the city, and there was a huge crowd around him. So many people would never even see Jesus, right? And there was Zacchaeus. He was a tax collector, and he was rich, and probably he was hated by many people. And according to the teachings that the spirits give us, especially Humberto de Campos through Francisco Cândido Xavier, it is understood that Zacchaeus also acquired his riches not through very legal means. According to the popular knowledge, the people look at him and say, he's a tax collector, you know, he's probably corrupt. So it was easy not to like him, obviously. And he was trying to see Jesus, and he couldn't. He goes and he climbs a tree just to see Jesus. Jesus sees Zacchaeus climbing the tree. And amongst everyone else, Jesus looks to this tax collector, this man that everyone else hated, this man that was more corrupt than many who were around him, and says, Zacchaeus, get down off that tree and prepare your house. I'm going to eat in your house tonight. Like many occasions, what people would say, here you go again, Jesus, going after those corrupt people, having supper in their house. You know, why Jesus is after all those hated people. You know, we are here following him. You know, we are here doing everything that we can, and he's going after those people. He's going to have supper in Zacchaeus' house. And there they go. And Jesus comes to his house. And Zacchaeus says something to Jesus. Behold, Lord, the half of my goods I give to the poor. If I have defrauded anyone of anything, I restore it fourfold. That is interesting, because here he's not telling Jesus, so when I, you know, one day I will give to the poor. You know, I have that good intention. I would like to do it. No, he said, I do it. Maybe because people hated him. No one cared about what he did and what he didn't do. He says, Jesus, I do it. There is some good in me. I know that the people hate me. I know that I'm imperfect. But I do certain things. I'm not perfect, but I do. And if I defraud someone, which means when I make a mistake, I try to amend. And I do amend. And I do whatever it is without my reach, with the knowledge and the abilities and the resources that I have, and I do it. So, you know, I'm not that bad. Like, I do something. And Jesus says something very interesting. Today, salvation has come to this house. Since he's also a son of Abraham, which was one of the expressions. He's also a son of God. He's also someone that is worth of having salvation come to them. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. We know that the word Jesus, if you go back to the origins of this name, originally means God's salvation. So Jesus was actually doing a little play with words. So, I came to your house, therefore salvation came to your house. Therefore, the idea that we are trying to understand here, does salvation come externally? No. Does that mean that Jesus is telling Zacchaeus, I came here so then you're going to be saved? No. Jesus was telling Zacchaeus and telling us in recognition of all of our efforts, despite our imperfections, that we have the means for salvation. When we do what our conscience tells us, when we recognize our imperfections, our wrongdoings, and when we do something about it, trying to be better, trying to amend our mistakes, trying to forgive ourselves for what we do, we will be saved. Jesus is telling us, let's recognize what we are doing, because salvation has already come to all of us. Salvation is the natural outcome of us living with charity, practicing the divine laws, forgiving, being benevolent, being indulgent, being humble, gentle, peaceful, seeing our neighbors as someone like us, and having Jesus, listening to him, because he is the model. His entire life was a life of charity. And he's telling us that in our house, in our inner house, there is salvation, because there is charity within each one of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tiago. We do have time for a few questions. If there is any question from the internet or anyone here that want to share with us, or any comment?
I have a question.
Go ahead, please.
So you mentioned that salvation is something that it's an individual effort. There's a lot around it, but it's an individual effort. And charity is an action that will benefit others, right? In some cases, we see people like doing more than just helping others. They are just going beyond and beyond, and sometimes they are removing the opportunity of someone to better themselves. How do we find a balance between charitable and not actually removing that opportunity from others? And is there a balance? Or we should always strive to do more and more and more, no matter what?
Before you answer, let me just repeat the question.
Sure.
Just
Sure.
summarizing the question is how, for those in the internet, how do we balance, being charitable versus taking away the opportunity for the person to grow with that lesson, going through whatever they have to go through?
That reminds me of one of the chapters in the Spirit's book talking about prayer. And Allan Kardec asks the spirits, like, if I pray for someone, will their pain go away? The spirits say, no. It's not the pain, it's not the challenge, it's not the problem that will go away. It will not go because somehow what we need to go through, what belongs to us, will come to us eventually for us to learn. Because again, nothing is punishment. If we talk about suffering, we're still talking about a natural consequence of what we do. But the idea is that we may, if you talk about that balance, the prayer, for instance, is giving someone strength and support, showing them they're not alone. They can count on people, that might be there for them. And most of the time when we talk about that, when we talk about someone's pain, not necessarily we talk about something material, because we can give someone anything material. If they're still struggling on how to use that resource for the good, they're still going to suffer, If we try to make a very positive environment for someone that is very depressed, it's going to increase their depression, because the conflict between how they are feeling and the environment around is going to be horrible. The whole idea of really trying to see the other and trying to mitigate a little bit and put aside a little bit temporarily our own needs. And the balance comes when we understand that many times when we are doing too much, we're not doing to anyone. We are trying to do for ourselves for some reason. And the balance will come when we understand that we will give something to someone, especially when they are asking, and especially when we have that good intention, that giving and the idea of charity without anything material. Pray, tell them that we are there for them, making sure that certain needs are being met that are possible to be met when we feel like we have resources to. But at the end of the day, if we are doing something and the other person is feeling down because we have too much, they don't have, so we are giving, that's already not charity at all. When we are doing something in order to take any sort of reward, that is not charity. The balance also comes from idea of understanding fully what charity is. If I do something, if I do too much for someone, I'm not acting with charity at all. I'm acting with a lot of pride that might be masked. And then I believe that in some point our conscience will weigh on us. And I think we are going to make mistakes in that way. It's better sometimes to make the mistake doing it than simply being absent. And in that way we're going to gauge, and the other will tell us as well, hey, thank you very much, but I'm feeling that, they will tell us in some point. If we're doing something good, the answer will come. If we're doing something positive, if we need readjustment, the message of readjustment will happen, but the ability to do good will not be taken away. It is a constant effort, right? I don't know if I answered somehow.
Yeah, and I think it's really hard to answer that question because it varies case by case. And if you remember the Gospel according to Spiritism, there is a chapter that talks about how much we should be helping others, right? So, and because we may think, we need to go for this trial, we need to go for this expiation, otherwise we're not going to grow. And so you can say, all right, so Raquel is doing whatever, let her go for that, let me step out and not do anything because she needs to go for that, right? In reality, the Gospel according to Spirit tells us that what if God put us in that position to help that other person, right? So that balance, as Tiago was saying, I think it would be very hard to identify. It's case by case, and at the end, it's all about intention, right?
Yeah. And also remembering some of the readings from André Luiz, right? How many times you see in the meetings from the spiritual world, they give the help, and they give the help, and they give the help until one time that they understand that they need to step back, because they are understanding that help is not going through, that has no effect, or is giving a negative effect. But still, the help is being given until they understand that they need to step back. So they will step back.
Yeah.
Someone else will go through their own way, and they will have the opportunity to meet along the way. We do our best. We will always receive a feedback from life of how we are doing in that way. But not doing, I think, is the most dangerous thing.
Any other questions or comments? All right. So thank you very much, Tiago.
Thank you.
So we're gonna get prepared for the pass. So I want to thank you everyone who watching us through the internet. I invite you guys to do your own final prayer, and for those, hope to see you guys again next Sunday.